Kafanana nekuti munhu anokuinga nekumashure kana izvo kafanana kana kuti tinoti kunonzi kwakafanana kana nekunonzi kuita sekuponda munhu kumuinga nekuseri ndizvo zvinenge zvakatofanana izvo bhozi iye anenge asina chaari kuona chaari kuziva. Inini ndakanzi enda kumurume ndine 14 years. Chikaita kuti ndiende chekuti ndashairwa mari yekuti ndiende kusekondari. Vakandimanikidza kuenda ikoko. Ndakasara vari vaiona nezvedupa rakashaya baba wangu. Ndaenda pamurume anga ane 42 years. Ndakasvika pakuita pamuri ndine 15 years.
Nearly 1 in 3 women in Zimbabwe are married before the age of 18. Gaps in the country's laws, extreme poverty, harmful religious beliefs, and traditional practices are critical factors fueling child marriage.
Ndakaroorwa ndine 15 years. Kuti ndizoroorwa kana ana ari pamuviri. Saka vabereki vangu vanga vasingakwanisi kuchengeta pamuviri ipapa vagona kwavaishanda. Kwete ini handabvira ndadzidziswa nezvebonde ndinasika zvezvi zvinofamba sei. Mwana pandakamusununguka anga ari mupenyu. Paanga akutoenda kupfekedzwa hembe. Nesa akabva achiti ndoshata mwana. Mwana uyu akafa hake mwedzi wakapera paseri. Kuti nini asi zvinomotora kundishungurudza.
If a girl falls pregnant, is suspected of being involved with a man, or is even raped, she may be forced into marriage to protect the family's honor.
Pandakapinda marriage ne 14 years. Chakaita kuti pinde mwana ndechekuti ndakamanikidzirwa nemunhu wandida naye anga ari muhombe kwandiri. Saka akaita zviya zvekundifosa kuti ndirare naye. Paakanoedza ndirare naye pandabata pamiri. Ndabata pamiri pekutanga haana kuramba. Ndakatomona kugara naye kumba kwake kwaaigara. Kozi ndiri mwana mudiki. Ende asingambozivi kuti marriage yakakoshera chii kana kuti chii chinonzi marriage.
Women and girls told us how child marriage exposed them to abuse and violence.
Bonya yakanyanyonetsa. Samagarisana taita manje taakugara tichingoroovana tichinetsana pamwe pacho charari mumba asingadzoki. Apana ndichiri mwana mudiki futi ndisingatombozivi kuti ndozvifambiswa sei.
Chii chakazoitika?
Chazoita pamberi choti mukurowana kwataita ikoko akabva azondiramadza ruoko.
The practice of child marriage is very common amongst indigenous apostolic churches who mix Christian beliefs with traditional cultures. They have over 1 million followers across the country. Archbishop Johannes Ndanga told us he was trying to stop child marriage, but was facing strong resistance.
When people are given wrong doctrine within the church, then that's where we have the biggest problem.
Ndanga said that virginity testing, including of girls as young as 12 years old, was widely practiced in the apostolic churches and linked to child marriage.
The old men will be checking on the girls, and also they are sent for virginity test. Those who pass, they apply a little millimil on their heads, so the old men would say that one is a virgin. So that the little girl becomes a choice for marriage right away.
Murume first aibata zvakanaka but akazipesa kuti vanadiki vanonetsa bhozi nguva idzo dzina ndine pfungwa dza vanadiki ndaitoti kana kunogeza ndaitotumwa nzara. Wadi kuna unogeza kana kuti rimwe basa remumba ndaitoita kuti utotumwa utonzi ita ichi. Ndega ndasanda kuzvifungira ndofanira kuti ndakapedza ndaita ichi ndakapedza ndoita ichi. Nekuti ndanichiri mudiki. Andandika grade 7 kana kanonoka ndochikora. Nitokufa kushura ndichitokwana pfungwa dzangu ndichitonga kutamba kana zvandaita zita dzangu kwandi mwana yari utori mucheche. Ana mai pamba tegara tositora mwana uye achochema ati ndichitotamba nevamwe vanhu.
Nearly all the child brides we interviewed could not continue their education after marriage, either because there was no money, their husband would not permit it, or because they had to care for a baby.
Inini ndinoshuvirawo kuti kana ndazoitawo vana vangu vaende kuchikoro vazoitawo nesi.
We need to promote girls' education in all the countries if you are to end child marriage. We need to make sure that girls are provided with alternatives to life so that their life choices and options are increased, not to see marriage as an alternative or a way of escaping poverty.
Inini ndoshuvira kuti dei zvaibvira kuti munhu anonzi anotora kana munhu achine makore kana kuti ari pasi pe-18 years anofanira kutosungwa kungoita mutemo kuti unonzi
The Zimbabwean government should show that it is serious about tackling the scourge of child marriage and change the minimum age for marriage to 18. The future of millions of girls depends on leaders standing up and taking action.
And welcome to a special episode of Tap In, where we will be looking at society and the underage bride. Before we get going, I'd like to sincerely apologize for the delays in kicking off. We faced some challenges with our presenters, but the good thing is we're all here now. We are ready. Please feel free to interact with us via the comments section. We would love to hear from you. So, when we talk about society, we actually want to break down 3 different areas today. So we want to look at the church, we want to look at the state, and we want to look at the community. The community being you and I and our everyday lives. How do we respond to the issue of child marriage? Joining me today in the studio, we've got Rudo Magwanyata, who is the Advocacy and Influence Officer with Shamari Yemwana Sikana. We've got Jonathan Chikasha, who is the National Coordinator for Ruveneko Rwenyenyedzi Trust. We've also got Julian Mugova, who is joining us virtually. She is a member of the Zimbabwe Women Lawyers Association. Unfortunately, Dr. Nyaradzai Gumbodrandha is unable to join us because of technical difficulties, but nevertheless, we will still make the best of the experts that we have with us today. So, without further ado, to get us going, I would like to pose the first question to Julian. Please, can you define for us your understanding of child marriage?
Thank you very much for welcoming us to the show. My brief definition of child marriage is the marital union in which either spouse or both spouses are under the age of 18. And given the way things have been lately, girls are the most disproportionately affected currently in Zimbabwe and in quite a lot of other African countries.
Thank you, Julian. And so what exactly does the state say about child marriage?
Currently, well, we have our constitution, which is not so new anymore, the 2013 constitution. In terms of section 76 of that constitution, it refers to marriage rights. And it states that every person who has attained the age of 18 years has the right to found a family. So in terms of our constitution, the age for marriage is 18. And in 2016, the Constitutional Court, in a case involving Matsuru and another versus the Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, declared that child marriages were unconstitutional. So effectively, taking that aspect of the law plus the Constitution in terms of Section 81, subsection 1E, which states that every child has the right to be protected from economic and sexual exploitation, from child labor, and from maltreatment, amongst other forms of abuse, shows that child marriages really are unconstitutional and they are not supposed to be happening. That is the state's position as defined by the law.
Thank you, Julian. So where exactly are we getting things wrong? It's obvious the state has a very set position as far as child marriage is concerned. It's a no. We're not supposed to be marrying off girls who are below the age of 18. So let me turn now to my guests in studio, and we'll start with Rudo. Where exactly are we going wrong if the laws are there?
The problem with Zimbabwe is that there's lack of implementation as far as the law is concerned. We need alignment of laws also, because once the constitution says that anyone who's above age of 18 can establish a marriage. Therefore, why don't we have other laws to support what the constitution says and criminalize child marriages?
Thank you. Jonathan, can we get your take?
Yeah, so my take on this is that the issue of child marriage, as has been alluded by my co-guest, is that it's still being seen as a social evil and not a crime. And we also need to harmonize our laws, align our laws to speak in one direction. For example, I'm coming from the religious constituency. The same constitution is telling me that the age of sexual consent is 16 and the age of marriage is 18. In our context, if my child is sexually defiled, and within the context of my faith, I have to marry off that child to save face and also to save my position in the church. So they are what to call, from a legal perspective, they call them lacunas or gaps within the constitution. It's not harmonized. It's not speaking in one direction. There are a lot of gaps. So till and as when we criminalize child marriage for what it is, we can start to have traction. But for now, it's still being seen as a social evil and not a crime. So I think that is where we are lacking vis-a-vis the issue of the constitution and constitutionalism. The constitution is just a document, but constitutionalism entails respect of what is in what is in the constitution. We have that paper tiger of 2013, the new constitution, or that constitution of 2013. We see that we have a ruling, a landmark ruling of 16 January 2016, the Topodzi ruling of Ringo Topodzi, which actually outlawed child marriage. This is 2016. This is 5 years ago. But in 2021, we are getting a case of Anna Machar, who is dying from the effects of something that was actually outlawed 5 years ago. So it tells us that there is a gap in our laws, and the spirit of implementation is lacking, like what my co-guest said. So I think that is where we're lacking.
Okay, so there's so many issues that have been raised around the laws governing child marriage and implementation. Before we delve deeper and start looking at the church particularly and society and how we respond to child marriage, let me just throw back the question to the lawyer amongst us. Julian, why does this gap exist? The laws are there. What's the problem? Why the delay? 5 years down the line, we still haven't had a harmonization of the laws. What's going on?
As indicated by the former speaker, there is a gap between the laws as they stand and what's actually on the ground. He indicated that the age of consent is at 16 and the age of marriage is 18. So that mismatch is one of the issues that then end up with child marriages happening, because people have consented at the age of 16, and then, as he indicated rightly so, some from a cultural or traditional perspective, or even some from some religious backgrounds, then decide to marry off that child. So for as long as our laws have not been aligned with the Constitution, then it will be a bit difficult to implement the laws practically on the ground. So that gap is one of the issues that are perpetuating child marriages. The other one is that we have social, religious, economic, and cultural aspects that still need to be addressed because they still do not align with or do not subscribe to what the law as it stands dictates. The other thing is that not all citizens are aware of the law as it stands. So there has to be a drive, I believe, to conscientize citizens on the law as it stands, and to encourage citizens to even lobby for the alignment of laws to the Constitution to ensure that we can eradicate child marriages. I know there was some steps that were taken towards that with the marriages bill that was proposed in 2019. And amongst its objectives was to eradicate child marriages, as it was expressly stated in there, as well as to confirm that the age of marriage is 18. So that was expressly put in there, which was one of the ways of ensuring that there is some sort of accountability in that regard and compliance with the law. So another thing that I believe would need to be done is to empower the girl child through aspects such as education, because once they're empowered, then at least people will know not to either marry their children off or end up in child marriages, amongst other things. And I recall that some time ago, OSISA had a program on the second chance education policy. That could be one other aspect which we could adopt and drive extensively to ensure that young dropouts, being girls, for instance, that have fallen pregnant, have a second chance at education. And in that way, you're also empowering the girl child. And that could be a measure towards eradicating child marriages, amongst other things.
So what I'm picking up is we've got two different aspects to the problem. Number one is the gaps in the laws and the issue of lack of implementation. But the second thing, and this is what really jumps out to me as a sociologist, is the issue to do with culture, the issue to do with our beliefs, our values. And especially of Zimbabweans, we hear the word hunu being thrown about. And that's something that was alluded to by all my guests today. And the statement that Jonathan mentioned, using the phrase sexually defiled, when a child who is single has sexual intercourse, the parents find out that this child is no longer a virgin, or maybe the child has even fallen pregnant. It becomes an issue where people now try and sort of remedy the situation by turning to marriage. So when we're talking about issues of culture, what can we do? How can we address these problems where the concept of hunu is taken to mean that one should be pure? When one loses that purity, it's a problem that we need to fix. What about the issues of caring for the next person? Because hunu also speaks about caring for one another, being there for one another, supporting one another. What happens to that if we're saying because a child has made a mistake, they definitely must get married to whoever it is that they've been intimate with? So let me come back into the studio and hear from Rudo. What is your take on the cultural beliefs or values that we have around sexuality and the role they play in child marriage? And how can we actually start to tackle some of these things so we can find that even without the legal sector jumping in to help us implement the laws, us as individuals, we can play a role in ending child marriage?
All right. As communities, I think our cultural norms have it that once a girl falls pregnant, she must elope. However, when you look at it, when a girl child is entered into that marriage, there's a lot of disadvantages that she faces. One of those is that her education is interrupted. Chances are that her living conditions there are not that well. So we leave a girl there psychologically damaged, or there are some effects that will affect her mentally. So as society and community, we need to move away from those norms and realize that the best interests of the girl child are also important. In as much as the girl child makes mistakes or she gets pregnant before marriage, we also need to understand that before marriage, there is her as a person. She has to go back to school. A plan can be made for a child to be taken care of. So we need to understand that we are moving away from societal norms. Times are changing. The girl child is experimenting due to biological changes, and it's basically contributed by the foods that we eat and other factors. So we need to, as society, we need to slightly move away from those norms of forcing girls into marriages and actually embracing them in a family setup to say, okay, you've made a mistake. It happens in life, but then we can't force you into a marriage because you don't know where you are going. Chances are your life is going to be interrupted. So embracing the girl child and actually letting her learn from your mistakes at home without forcing her into a marriage would actually help to put the best interest of the girl child first.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Yeah, so my point on my take on the point that you raised revolves around the issue that we need to understand that culture is a product of history, time, time and space. So what do I mean by this, by history, time and space? There are some things that are created over time. They become a belief system and it becomes systemic, right? We are Africans. So whenever we are crafting laws, we are also appealing to the lawmakers. When we are crafting laws, let's craft laws that speak to who we are. Our very being in our process of what? Of becoming. For example, that is why you see in some Islamic states, they use Sharia law. It is derived from their culture. It is derived from their what? From their religion. Our challenge is that we are now living in a globalized village. We are trying to emulate what other countries do. We are trying to emulate what the global world does in crafting our laws. So that's where we have a problem. That's where we have these gaps. That's where we have situations where we have the law actually empowering the perpetrator and not protecting what? The victim. For example, if you look at the Constitution, we used to have what we call statutory rape. It now no longer exists if you look at it. It's now called sexual defilement. We have cases of young girls who have been married off or who have been in a relationship, a sexual relationship with an adult, 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds. There's an issue, a case that we pursued in Mutare last year under the trusted them as by. We were so disturbed because the perpetrator only got what do you call this? Community service. He got community service for bedding a minor. The guy was 50, the minor was 14. Because when the girl was called, the girl said that I love my what? Under cross-examination. I'm in love with my what? I'm in love with my boyfriend. So you see now, that is when parents start pushing that girl, to get married. Because what she is doing is against the norms that have been created over history, time and what? Time and space. So if we are crafting our laws, they should also speak of what? Speak of that. Under the Marange sect, child marriage is generational. There are grandmothers who are there who were married off when they were young. There are mothers who were there who were married off when they were young. There are these young children who are dying now who are being married off. So for us to really, win this fight, we need to understand that and formulate strategies that also speak to the context of our culture, who we are, because we cannot deviate from that. Because we are actually empowering the what? The perpetrators. The parent will simply tell you that in our culture, I cannot stay with a child who's promiscuous. And if they take precedency from the societal norms, you find that they will be having, a local stand to push their arguments across. So I think we need to actually cover that gap and actually acknowledge that society is not a homogeneous entity. It's an onion with so many layers. We have close communities of faith, like where I'm coming from the church side. We believe in the Holy Spirit. If the Holy Spirit tells us that this is wrong, no matter what the Constitution says, that is why we're having problems, Kamarange. That is the reason why we're having problems in the apostolic community. That is the reason why we're having problems in indigenous churches. Even in America, it happened. If you research on the Mormon church, the guy is actually serving multiple life sentences for beating 12-year-olds. He was arrested, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, being on the run for almost 10 years. His own church people protecting him. So this is a global problem. Religious fundamentalism against what is on the ground. We need to take cognizance of that if we are planning and trying to do anything to fight child marriages. So yeah, that's my take.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about what's actually happening on the ground with indigenous churches? Because we've also seen on social media that there are various entities who have been doing work within indigenous churches, and we have some church leaders that are speaking out against child marriage. So where exactly is the disconnect? Is it the issue of a different church with a different church leader having different beliefs as far as child marriage is concerned? Or are they just airbrushing things and showing us things sometimes on social media that actually aren't happening on the ground?
So basically, when I responded to the first call submission made by you and my co-guest, I mentioned the aspect of history, time and space. These are things that have been created over time, and you need to understand that slow progress is a very slow process, especially if you're dealing with these things. So coming from an apostolic perspective, I'm from Johann Maswet Chanu, or Johann V of Africa. So what we did under our church, the first stage was to gain compliance. By compliance, what am I trying to say? We first registered within the confines of the laws of the country. If you find many sects are just mushrooming under trees, there's no regulation whatsoever. They don't have licenses. Nobody knows what they are doing there. That's creating room for abuse of women and young girls. We registered a trust called Revenegorowenyizi Trust, which is meant, to protect women and young girls and boys from abuse. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to transform ourselves to suit global standards and end values. How do we do that? We are pushing what you call the human minimum standards movement, where we are saying to our senior clergies and other people in these indigenous church constituencies that we're not asking for much. We're not asking for your lungs. We're not asking for your limbs. We're simply asking for you to enforce what is basic. A child should go to school. A child should be protected. Children should be immunized and access health. Sexual reproductive health rights, access and services, all those things. We are working with the all-important question that if we do not invest in children, what Africa shall we bequeath to the future? What inheritance are we leaving for the children? For us, we believe that it is easy to create strong children than to repair broken men. Let's deal with it. So that is where we're coming from. And the good thing is that there's actually somebody who is claiming responsibility and acknowledging the presence of these problems through our existence. Kudara kwanga kusina. Penguins bazora nyanzi child marriages, people would say that kweda kuna. So the fact that the trust is existing is a sign of the future ahead. And we are using what we call the soft power model, where we are trying to influence our peers through power of persuasion. Because if we force things down their throat, they're not going to accept it. So we influence them bit by bit, and we know that we will get there over time and space.
Great. So I have a question for Rudo. We've been talking mostly about child marriage in the sense that the parent is the one who forces the child to get married, or the church is the one who forces the child to get married. Is that always the case? Or do young people themselves also have a role to play?
Looking at how things have been with development and everything, we've also seen from our work that some girls actually settle for marriage as a way of running away from the situation at home. Some believe that it's okay to just go and get married and stay at home. Basically, we have girls that are stuck at home with their abusers. Probably it's a stepfather or an uncle that is at home, and the mother does not understand that abuse is going on at home. So for her to actually go off and it's actually a way of looking for a safe haven for her, because according to her, the boyfriend can offer her that. So we have girls who willingly go into marriage, looking at their situation at home or their background, forces them into marriage.
So what do we do in that instance? Because it then becomes a bit of a complex matter where it's not just about poverty. It's not just about what is the church saying. It is also about my personal circumstances as a young person. So how can we even begin to tackle that problem? What do we do?
There is need for psychosocial support for girls. They need to understand, or actually have that emotional understanding that beyond marriage, there is something more. There are people out there who are willing to help. There are organizations, police are there to help. So for them to understand that in that situation, I can actually reach out, understand. I can go to Joshua's Church Foundation Trust, and they can actually hear me out and help me. So there is need for sensitization, information to be out there that girls can actually speak out, whether you've got issues with abuse or some situation at home is forcing you as a girl to run into marriage is a safe haven. You can speak up and get help from those who are willing to help, who are actually out there.
Thank you. I'm going to switch back quickly to Julian, who is joining us virtually. There's been talk in the studio of how the people of Zimbabwe can be part of the process where these laws are made. We go forward and we go into implementation mode. So as the ordinary Zimbabwean, what can I do if I want to be involved in those processes? Is there room for me? What type of space exists in the country where we can actually get involved as your everyday Zimbabwean?
There are quite a few spaces. The first would be to lobby Parliament through, there's different organizations that usually write papers to lobby Parliament to enact some laws or to amend some laws. And then when Parliament then invites the public, once a bill is out, for the public to come in and share their views on the bill. I would encourage citizens to read the bills. A lot of them will just say some amendments that are usually easy to understand, and participate in the bill process. If you agree with it, it's okay to say you agree with it. If you disagree with it or you've got recommendations, you can always do that. And I know the Parliament of Zimbabwe usually recommends input from citizens via email. So that's also one way that people can also be involved in ensuring that they participate effectively in the promulgation or amendment of the laws as an ordinary citizen.
Thank you so much, Julian. So just to emphasize on that, as a citizen of Zimbabwe, it's not just about sitting behind your keyboard and typing comments, being a keyboard warrior as far as dealing with some of the issues in our society is concerned. You can also play a more active role using the various channels that Julian has highlighted. And as we get ready to round up, I would like to come back into the studio and find out from my experts here, if you were dealing, Rudo, with a teenage girl who wants to get married or has eloped already, who views marriage as an achievement or is running away from, the various contexts that you mentioned, what type of advice would you give to this girl?
I would actually advise her to wait for the time until she reaches maturity, until she understands what marriage is, what is expected of her in marriage, until basically she reaches her dreams. Because I know as a girl child, you don't wake up tomorrow and all you want to do is to get married. We have dreams, we have things that we want to achieve. So I'd actually encourage her to do that, follow her dreams. If she can't, she doesn't know what she wants to do, there are people who can actually mentor her and make her realize what her potential is. So for a girl out there who's thinking of getting married and actually thinking marriage is the only solution, she should reach out for help. She should seek help when she thinks she can get help. That's why we are there as the CSOs, to help girls realize their potential and their dreams, to be the change makers that we want to see tomorrow.
And Jonathan, if you are working within your space of Indigenous churches, if this girl child came to you, it's not the parents, it's the girl herself. She has grown up in that system, maybe where her family has made her see marriage as an achievement, or she has fallen pregnant, whatever case it is. How would you advise this young girl?
My advice will revolve around, trying to motivate her to look at life from a different perspective, because they've been socialized to think that, being married off early or getting married is the solution. So I would simply tell you that hope does not despair. Let's invest in fighting for a future where you are independent, where you can think rationally, where you can make decisions on your own, despite of the problems that you're facing now.
Thank you. And then on the flip side, if it's the parents who are trying to push this girl who's not really interested into child marriage because of the various reasons that you've raised throughout this session, what would you say to them?
What parents need to understand is that if they are working for the inheritance of or creating legacy around their children, so that their names will live after, even if they pass away. So I will simply ask them a question: what Africa or what Zimbabwe do you want to bequeath to the future? if you are, doing this to your child, if you're not empowering your child, if your child is not going to, to school, if your child is not accessing, modern medical facilities, what future do you want to create for your child? What legacy do you want to leave behind? So in any decision that you take, you're supposed to be having that in the back of your mind. This is my child. This is my legacy. This is the person who's going to live after me. What type of a person do I want to live? What type of a father am I creating in my child? What type of a mother am I creating in my child? It's based on our decisions. Whatever the circumstances are, whatever the belief systems are, we need to understand that life is changing. We're now no longer living in what? We're now no longer living in the past. And just to round up, children there in the Silicon Valley, there in America, they're thinking, they are working on technology, thinking on how they can create programs on how to download food online. But here we are still arguing about, trying to put a girl or a boy inside, the four corners of a classroom. So what are we doing to ourselves? What are we doing to our countries? What are we doing to our communities? So I think parents and policymakers and powers that be, they need to have that at the back of their mind.
Rudo, would you like to add anything?
I just want to say, every parent wants to see their child succeed. So as parents also, they need to also think of seeing their child tomorrow being probably the next president. When they be proud of that, seeing their daughter making changes in the world, being the most famous citizen. So as a parent, they need to dream beyond marriage. They need to see their daughter being the next president or the doctor or whatever that it is. So as parents also need to have a vision for their children. Marriage is not the beginning or the end of a girl's life. She also has the ability, the capacity to be who she wants to be. So as a girl, she also needs the support of the parents. So parents need to change that perspective and actually support their child's dreams.
As we close off, I would just like to wrap up the discussion by saying that there are so many spaces for us to make a difference as Zimbabweans, as far as things like child marriage is concerned. There is space for mentorship that has been spoken about in the studio. There is space for awareness raising. There is space for lobbying. There is no person in the country who should say they don't have a role to play as far as child marriage is concerned. Even with the parents, if you don't want to take up any three of those different segments, simply talking to your child, having an open conversation with your child, acknowledging the fact that pregnancy is not a good enough reason for someone to get married off. Those are all ways that we can all make a difference in tackling child marriage and getting to a place where it is no longer something that is viewed as a norm in our society. And with that, I would like to say thank you so much for tuning in. This has been another episode of Tap In under Yo Pet Health. If you would like to find out more about what we do, please do like and follow us on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. Thank you so much to my guests today, Julian from Zimbabwe Women Lawyers Association, Rudo from Shamwari Yemwana Sikana, and Jonathan from Ruvenego Rwenyenyedzi Trust. Thank you so much for coming. I have been your host, Dr. Shamiso Christine Madzivire, the Research, Monitoring and Evaluation Director for Yo Pet Health Zimbabwe. Till next time, thank you.
Thank you.